Hey, what's up guys? So I had a really cool opportunity here with Brad Richards, the VP of Design and the Creative Director of Motorcycles at Harley-Davidson Motor Company. So Brad Richards here. Thanks for sitting with me and taking some time out, Brad. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, always a pleasure hanging out with you, Matt.
So I just had the opportunity today to ride the Softails. We're here learning about all the changes that were applied to the Softail lineup this year. This model year, I've kind of broken it down into three things in my past videos. We had the Street Glide Ultra this year, which is a big new model launch. We had the Pan America ST this year as well, another big model launch. And what I think is probably the biggest thing that's going to influence the most riders this year is the collection of changes they've applied to the Softail family this year.
That's right.
So we did do away with one Softail this year when you compare it to the lineup last year, and that is the Softail Standard. And I think with cutting that from the lineup, we now have 6 motorcycles that are very unique in who they appeal to. So there's very little overlap in the styling in all 6 of the bikes.
Right. And that was the whole point, is we tried to work to the perfect Softail portfolio. If you have models that are similar, then one customer might have a hard time deciding between this one and that one. And then, if you think about just sort of the economics of scale and the manufacturing process and everything that goes into selling a motorcycle, which you know intimately, it just makes it so much easier if we have sort of a little bit more space between each of the models and fewer models.
Yeah.
As long as we have everyone's use case sort of covered, which
Yeah.
is the first thing that you have to make sure you do.
So this year, I think this is a first, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have 3 different tunes on these motorcycles.
That's right.
So you have the classic tune, the custom tune, and then the high output tune, right?
That's right, you nailed it, yeah.
What kind of influenced that decision to go that route? Like I just find it interesting, and now that I've ridden all of them, I feel like it's very applicable to kind of tuning the bikes. Yeah. And one thing I learned is the high output motor has the exact same cam as the CVO Road Glide ST.
That's right.
So that's really cool for the buyer that doesn't necessarily, have the means to get a CVO Road Glide ST. You have kind of the same cam.
The same heads and yeah. When we talk about designing Harley-Davidsons, the first thing that comes to my mind is just you want to make sure that the experience has a lot of character, right? We call it kind of a characterful riding experience, and what that really means is there's this trilogy of character that we use when we're designing a Harley-Davidson. It's not just look, it's not just sound, it's not just feel, but it's all 3 of those things: look, sound, and feel. So that's sort of like our little. We kind of have to make sure that every decision we make, we push through those 3 filters to make sure that it's enhancing the experience for the customer. The really unique thing about the Softail family is you have 6 unique models. A lot of the architecture is shared. So what you don't want to do is have 6 motorcycles that look different but feel identical when you're riding them, sound identical, that vibrate. So you want to make sure that each of the models is unique and distinguished from the next, and has its own, kind of why-buy for the customers and character. And when you're thinking about the breadth of personalities between a Heritage and a Lowrider ST, or a Heritage and a Breakout, that's a pretty major stretch of use case and customer, right? Like that's a totally different customer, those 2 customers.
100%.
And then if you think about the other 4 other 4 personalities in that family, that's a lot of, you're targeting a very wide breadth of customers. But again, if the motorcycles all kind of feel the same, it's like, well, why are we doing this? So look, sound, and feel is a really important part of doing that.
I think it's interesting that there are so many elements of the bikes that differentiate the different models. Yeah. I feel like there's a number of motorcycle companies that they change maybe the wheels and they change maybe a windshield and bags, and they call it a completely different model. Right. But the fact now that these 6 Softails have, some of them have very bespoke parts to just that model. That's right. Now the Street Bob is the only one that has that 3.5 gallon tank. This year we have a new laced wheel for the Heritage. Yeah, and the Street Bob, which I think is very cool. We're going back to a spoke wheel available on the Street Bob now. What influenced that decision?
Well, that motorcycle always, in my mind, needed to have a laced wheel, right? And just to be totally honest, when we went through the pandemic, a lot of our supply chain and a lot of our sourcing just was disrupted. And some of those long-term suppliers that we had, they went away. To be honest, for one way or either was our decision because of just economics, or it might have been some other factor that contributed to that. But we had that cast wheel for a while, and it was on the standard, right? I think that the Street Bob just needs a laced wheel. We happen to be doing really cool things in the CVO lineup with the Cast Lace 21 on the Road Glide a few years back. And then we also further developed the Cast Lace technology for Pan America. So Cast Lace is really cool because it allows you to run TPMS, which standard laced wheels don't let you do that. So, and it's also kind of a cool new look. It makes the wheel look a little bit bigger because it's pulling the spoke all the way out and beyond the edge of the rim. So aesthetically, it's making, I think, an improvement as well. So
I agree with you. Yeah, I like the look of it a lot. And like you said, it's not just style, it's function too, right? I mean, you got the tire pressure monitoring system now, which is part of the new electrical architecture.
That's right.
So we have the TPMS. We've also introduced things like ride modes, which is huge. LED lighting.
LED lighting across the board. A beautiful new Zeppelin light on Heritage and Lowrider S and ST.
Yeah, that's the tail light, right?
Yep.
Yep, I agree with that. That light is awesome. Gauges are new as well.
Gauges are updated, yeah. Yep, they are. Some folks may ask why we evolved away from some of the digital gauges that are embedded in the riser cover.
So the street bob and the breakout, the little LCD screen, yeah.
Yeah, which was cool, but this new technology required a little bit more space for us to, sort of communicate with the customer what's happening with the motorcycle. So that was what drove some of those decisions.
Paul mentioned that, Paul Weiss, one of the engineers, mentioned that this morning, that you guys needed the real estate to do things like the tire pressure monitoring and some of the other
ride modes,
ride modes. Yeah, very cool. So today we were actually able to experience, I say we, me and some of the other content creators here, we were able to experience the ride modes and just the way that the traction control interacts in the different ride modes and the different levels of intervention. There's sand out on the asphalt. We got to have the outriggers we did a street bob today, put it into a turn, goosed it, and just kind of felt the wheel, step away from you and fished a little bit.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It honestly, unless I had that environment that I had today, I never would have pushed it to its limits like we did today. And so really feeling how, like the rain mode, for example, you open the throttle all the way up and it like really controls the amount of power being delivered to the rear wheel. And then you can turn traction control off, for those of you who want to do burnouts. You turn the cut. And it's just, it just spins, and obviously it's amazing what the computer can do so quickly. Let me ask you this, Brad. The ride modes and everything, has that always been like influenced by safety and just wanting to make the riders safer out there? Or?
I mean, the bottom line is we wanted to have as many people riding Harley-Davidsons as possible. And the safer that you make them, that it draws a certain amount of folks who are new to the sport into the sport, knowing that the motorcycle is actually safer than they thought it was. And to your point, a lot of the technology is quicker than we are. So as much as I'm sort of an analog guy and I prefer to not have the intervention, there have been moments where it's like frankly saved me, so it's like I'm glad it's there. And those moments, like you said, when you want to be a bit of a hooligan and you want to switch it off, you can do that too. So it's sort of the best of both worlds. But we've all been, like, on your trips, you've been in places where all of a sudden the weather has surprised you. Like it's either rained or sometimes even snowed. In my case, I've experienced that. Going to Sturgis on Pan Americas a couple years ago with Danger Dan. And
I remember that.
And it was really nice to have that technology just to flip a switch and the bike all of a sudden is like, hey, I've kind of got you.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. And so as much as some of us want to be sort of like, I don't need that, it's nice to have it if you need it.
Totally.
Yeah.
We've all been tired on a trip where we've already logged 500 miles. You find yourself in a mountain or something, it starts to rain. It's like, dude, I'm turning on rain mode. I'm not thinking 100%. About it as hard as I would otherwise. I just got a comment on a video today, Brad, that said something to the effect of, why do these bikes cost so much when they're so basic? And I felt like that was such an ignorant comment. And maybe you can articulate this better than I can, like many things, but there's so much technology in these bikes now. And I feel like Harley-Davidson has developed, this might be a little bit outside of your scope, you're a design guy, but at the same time, I think you're pretty well connected with the tech too. But I guess this is design related. What's Harley-Davidson's methodology in keeping these bikes classic, but making it continually improving the tech in these bikes, just like what they did this year? How do you find that balance in your world?
Well, I mean, one of the analogies that I like to use is power windows in a car, right? There was a time when power windows were sort of like it was a customer delighter, right? It was when everyone was rolling up windows manually. This is before your time, man.
Hey, I remember doing that still in a couple cars. Yeah.
But all of a sudden, so you see that you find in that era, and I'm talking about probably the 70s and 80s, early 80s, that the automobiles that had power windows, that was like, oh my God, the windows go up, they hit a button, it goes up, it's incredible, A company can essentially charge for that, and it can be part of a kind of a higher spec package in whatever you're selling. But at some point, it's called the Kano model, but at some point that technology is just, it's expected. Everyone has it, and you can no longer essentially charge for it, right? It just becomes like if you bought a car today and it didn't have power windows, you'd be like, what the hell's going on?
Totally. Or power steering, or
right, exactly. So so technology is something that, especially features like that, there's a moment where they're very cutting edge and they're very premium, and then there's also a moment where they become sort of commonplace, like you have to have them. Table stakes, we call it, right? With Harley-Davidsons, it's essentially the same thing, but with our technology, if we choose to put technology on the motorcycle, it's because we're trying to enhance the rider experience. We're either trying to make it a little safer for folks, we're trying to make it more characterful, we're trying to make the thing have more performance, maybe the handling is better or the braking's better. That's why we make these decisions, right? We don't just do technology to do technology. We do technology because we think we're going to provide a better experience for our customers. Yeah. Now, when we put technology on our motorcycles, especially the Softails, because if you think about a Softail, especially like a Street Bob, right? It's almost like a minimalist motorcycle. There's nothing on it. The trick is to I wouldn't say disguise. I was going to say disguise, but I would say the trick is to hide the technology and put it someplace where it's not in your face. Yep. So there are other forms of like transportation and so on where you kind of do you do flaunt the technology, but on a motorcycle, especially a Harley-Davidson, it has to remain pure. If it even makes the difficult journey to be put on the motorcycle, in other words, if we think that it's something that will truly enhance the rider experience, then we need to do it in a way that's somewhat transparent. It's going to be very functional and easy to use and intuitive, but it's not going to be in your face with a bunch of black boxes and wires all over the motorcycle. That's how we like to do it, and it's really difficult to do that. Yeah. If you look at a Harley-Davidson versus any of our competitive motorcycles, our bikes, I think, are just, they're cleaner, they're purer, there's not plastic covering up stuff all over the place. And in order to do that, to keep the powertrain fully exposed, almost 360 degrees, to do that and put the cabling in a certain place, and that forces the manufacturing facility to have to build a motorcycle in a certain way. When I choose to hide a cable or a line, put it somewhere in the motorcycle and so no one can see it, so when you're enjoying like washing or looking at your beautiful Harley-Davidson you just paid good money for, you feel like it was a great investment because this thing's is a piece of artwork, it's a piece of jewelry, it's beautiful. That has repercussions like all the way through the company in terms of costs and just how hard that is to do those things. And I think a lot of folks that maybe build bikes in their garage or maybe haven't really thought about it in that way or haven't been exposed to the full ecosystem of like a manufacturing process, it might seem like why is that hard, but it truly is difficult to do in this day and age, and we do I think the best job at it.
I agree. Do you feel like that's what you just described right there? Do you feel like it's underappreciated sometimes by people that don't really get Harley-Davidson?
Yeah, maybe. I think that I've always felt that people make decisions about motorcycles, which bikes they're going to buy. They may not always be able to articulate why they like it better than the competition, but I think it's these things that are a little bit difficult to see because they are somewhat transparent that makes the Harley-Davidson feel more premium and just feel like a better choice and just a more beautiful piece of engineering and a beautiful piece of design, because we do these things and work so hard to make certain things transparent and frankly make some of the things just go away. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so you don't see them. So all you see is powertrain, beautiful paint and graphics, beautiful wheels, and a set of handlebars. Like that is, it really is a challenge in this day and age, because not only do you have customers that are actually desiring more technology, but you also have global engineering and safety mandates that we have to do certain things, emissions, Euro 5, and so all these things make our job in the design department and the engineering department really difficult, because every decision that's usually made is either trying to make something bigger or put more plastic or more black boxes or more wiring on the motorcycle. And all we're trying to do is chop it all off and just make the purest expression of the product as we can.
Thank you for saying what you just said. Guys, I think what Brad just said right there is going to answer 90% of what the haters say about Harley-Davidson. Most people that watch my channel love Harley-Davidson, so I don't need to say that. But that right there, the attention to detail they do, incorporating technology into the bike and continuing to really magnify the engine, the wheels, and the bars, and incorporating technology into the bike at the same time, that's something that Harley-Davidson does very, very well, and probably better than anybody, quite frankly.
Right.
So Brad, we're gonna do kind of a little lightning round thing here. So we're gonna go through all the bikes, and we can spend a lot of time on 6 different motorcycles here, but we're gonna try to just get through this pretty quick. Let me ask you this first, and I think I know the answer to this. What of the 6 bikes this year in the cruiser lineup? By the way, side note, sorry, I'm all over the place. Are we calling them cruisers now as opposed to Softails, or are they still? Is it both? Like, I feel like Harley is using the word cruiser more and more nowadays.
That's not intentional. I think cruiser is just it's the way that we define these types of motorcycles within our portfolio, and then specifically this is the Softail line of cruisers that we have. But right now these are our cruisers. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So getting back to the question, of the 6 motorcycles, cruisers, which is your favorite? Which are you the most proud of this year?
I mean, they're all our children, right, at Harley, so it's hard to pick favorites. But I mean,
maybe a personal favorite.
I mean, Lowrider ST and Lowrider S, because that was sort of 10 years ago when I came on board. That was the first motorcycle that I got to kind of put on the map and with the team, and I really love the fact that that's unlocked performance for Harley-Davidson, pushrod V-twin performance, and especially your part of the world, right? That's such an important customer for you, and it sort of unlocked a whole new chapter for Harley-Davidson, frankly. And
it really did.
I think that's a really great, and on top of that, they're great motorcycles, right? The Lowrider ST specifically is probably one of the best. Like, if you had to buy one bike in that space, that's probably the choice, right? Because it can just do a little bit of everything. So anyway, but I do love them all, but that one is very near and dear to me for sure.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll start off with the Lowrider ST first.
Sure.
I feel like that's one of the bikes that got a lot of attention initially when they all got announced at the beginning of the 25 model year in January, especially that blue burst with the chrome trim. So talk a little bit about the decision to allow for a chrome option on the ST.
Sure. So, I mean, as you know, we go all over the world to look at to kind of experience shows and see what our customers are doing with the bikes, and we started seeing some chrome, and folks inside the studio who are building personal bikes at home, like myself, we started kind of like looking at chrome a little bit differently. I think it's sort of a very common human behavior that when you have a whole lot of one thing, you tend to start wanting the other thing, especially in motorcycles where we're all trying to stand out a little bit, and cruisers are certainly about self-expression. You heard me this morning talking about how they're blank canvases for a lot of us. I think those bikes sometimes kind of choose you, but whether we like to admit this or not, I believe that it's important to us to make sure that the world sees us the way we want the world to see us. So it's about self-expression, and the Softail you choose is based on your personality. So, but that particular motorcycle, we had been doing it with dark finishes for a long time, made a lot of sense. It fit the ethos of the motorcycle and the character of that bike. But like I said, you start seeing a sea of black motorcycles, and all of a sudden you want to ride something a little bit different. So Bright made a lot of sense because the original FXR and FXRTs were in that space and that time frame when bright finishes were popular. We chose that logo specifically basically took it right out of the history book because it just spoke to that era really nicely, and it was one of our internal favorite logos we've been wanting to bring back for a long time.
Heck yeah.
And we knew we had a really special model. I think it may have surprised some of the folks inside the company, to be honest.
Surprised some of the folks that
just it was logo? Just because I think they thought, well, it's just a chrome Lowrider ST, that's cool. But I'm like, well, no, it is just a chrome Lowrider ST, but it's speaking to a little bit of a shift in taste right now with this customer, and that's a big deal because we're sort of right in line with them, and that speaks to our relevance and being like very timely and being aware of what's happening out there on the scene, and that's important, and so the company said, all right, let's do it, and so and that's what we did. And so that bike, like you said, I probably had the most people texting me with pictures of that bike, asking about it and loving it, and so yeah, of the Softails, that's definitely my favorite this year for sure.
I love to hear you say that you picked a logo and the chrome was kind of inspired by the FXRT, because I feel like there is a crowd, especially in Southern California, that just loves that bike and loves that style, and a lot of those people are buying the Lowrider STs because I feel like it was the perfect modern adaptation of that bike. The fairing, I think you guys spot on hit it. Real quick, can you talk about I know this was back in 22, I think the last time we spoke was back in 22, when that bike came out, it was further and faster, that's when you first launched the Lowrider ST. Can you talk a little bit about that fairing and how, like, the design process behind it? Like, was it a long process? Like, did you do clay models of it and kind of go from there? Or how does that work?
Typically, we do a variety of sketches. We do typically go into clay. On that one, we did have some clay. That was done by the internal team. All the fairings are done by the internal team. We like to use clay because clay is a way for us to quickly explore different ideas. We literally have we have an oven that heats the clay up. It's literally a pizza oven, by the way, and it's the same one they use in the automotive industry, but it's a special kind of clay, and it allows you to quickly mold and shape really fast, and you can then scrape it off, and it's a pleasure to work with, because you can make a fairing look completely different in 5 minutes. And so you try a bunch of different versions of it. The clay is on the motorcycle at some point when we get ready to review it. We take it somewhere, usually to our test track, where we can get back 200 feet to look at it. Because looking at it like this close, you see certain details, but you don't see the bigger proportional issues that you might have until you get back from the product a little bit, back from the motorcycle a little bit. So it's a cyclical process. Once we get something we like, we scan it, then we kind of send it into the computer and digitally kind of build it around the clay, and then we mill it back out in clay and look at it again, make changes, and we do this about 6 or 7 times usually on average. And that's usually what you would do too in the automotive industry when you're doing like a truck or a car. You do the same amount of iterations, and it's just sort of like what it takes the human eye and hand to put it all together and get it right. We didn't want to just simply do a carbon copy of the FXRT fairing because we wanted it to be fresh and speak to today. And there were certain other things we wanted to have. We wanted to have the audio there, and there was also aerodynamic considerations. So it was in the wind tunnel, and we made sure there wasn't weird buffeting. And for a small fixed fairing, it does a really good job of keeping the wind off you. So yeah, that's how that one came. Yeah, we use all those things in the studio. From sketches to computers to clays. Sometimes we do rough cardboard mock-ups. I mean, we use what's ever in front of us.
Yeah. Right on. It's one of my personal favorites as well, and so I'm always just intrigued by it. And a lot of the riders have really taken to that fairing. A lot of people love it. Okay, let's move on, Brad. So let's go Lowrider S, since that also has the 117 cubic inch high output motor. I just put out a Lowrider S video recently, and I was honestly surprised at just how dramatic the tuning in combination with that cam made the bike feel. I felt like, okay, this is going to be a little bit of like, you got to ride them back to back to really feel the difference, and this is just kind of a sales tactic that Harley-Davidson's trying to do. But no, like, that bike needs to be ridden the way that you'd expect it to need to be ridden. High RPM, pulling all the way to 5,000 RPM plus. And I just feel like the Lowrider S and Lowrider ST are bikes that, like you said, unlocked a performance game for the motor company, and it's caught on like wildfire. I think performance is very hot right now with a lot of Harley-Davidson owners. And so you've taken a bike that I feel like was really good last year, and you've made it just that much better. Anything to add to that in terms of just the Lowrider S in general?
Well, I mean, I think 2-in-1 exhaust system was a huge thing. One thing we didn't mention on the Lowrider ST is the asymmetric bags were a real, that was hard for a lot of folks to deal with asymmetry, which it makes sense, especially if you swap out the exhaust to a 2-in-1. That made sense. So this year we have symmetrical bags. We have the 2-in-1 exhaust, which makes a lot more sense for folks. Bike looks fantastic with it. The new LED lighting across the board. But I think what you're talking about in terms of just the amount of difference between last year's model and this year's model with the powertrain just speaks to sort of the flexibility. And I mean, I think the Milwaukee 8 is just a brilliant powertrain, and so we're able to get all this different character out of basically the same group of parts. Granted, it has a unique cam, and it has, I think this year we just took the heads right off of the FLs and put it on the Softails on all of them. If you look at the 6 Softails, you can really tell the different engine tunings by the intakes. So the classics are Heritage and Street Bob have the classic round air intake. The customs, which are Breakout and Fat Boy, have basically have the new touring intake. It's pretty big. I think it's 4 liters, something like that.
Big airbox.
It's a big airbox, yeah. And then the Lowrider S and ST have the heavy breather. So that's the best way to just visually note which ones are which.
Yeah.
Which we originally tried to do some things with like unique finishes, not unique, but common finishes for each, but it just got too complicated and didn't make sense on some things. So you're going to see some black finishes, you're going to wrinkle finishes, you're going to see chrome, and you're also going to see some polished aluminum finishes as well on bikes like Street Bob.
Very nice. I'm glad you brought up the symmetrical bags this year. That was never something that bothered me, but it did bother a lot of people, and a lot of people are really excited about those symmetrical bags now.
Yeah. On Heritage as well, by the way, because Heritage has the 2-1. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And I have some more questions to ask about the Heritage in just a minute, but I feel like that it makes a lot of sense too, just because the 2-1 is more of a performance-oriented style for a lot of these guys as well.
That's right.
So I think that's very cool. So let's move on now to the custom bikes. So you mentioned the custom bikes, the Fat Boy and the Breakout. A couple changes there. We'll start with the Breakout first. So Breakout, you have the new gauge. A lot of people I think would argue adds a little bit more. There's more equipment there on the bars. They're less clean now.
Yeah.
However, I still think that it's a muscle cruiser, right? And so I think that the gauge on top of the handlebars is still very relevant to that style of motorcycle.
To me, there's some drag bike in it, and I like it, and it's easier to read, and like we talked about, the technology required it. So
you still have that big 240 millimeter rear tire back there, the 21-inch wheel.
On both.
Yep. You had the 5-gallon tank, which we moved to in 23 when the Breakout was reintroduced in North America.
Right. That was something we heard from a lot of customers. We originally, when we had that Street Bob, so the fuel tank that we had on Breakout originally was the Street Bob fuel tank.
Yep.
And this morning I mentioned that the whole point of that Street Bob fuel tank was we took the sides of it and rocked it in so that the powertrain sort of hung out. And we're always trying to make the engine look bigger. That's kind of what we think speaks to our customer about Harley-Davidson, is this beautiful kind of, celebrating the mechanicalness of our products. Getting that engine to stand out and be the first thing the first most dominant feature of the motorcycle is something that we always try to strive for. Engine is the diamond, the rest of the motorcycle is the setting. That's the other way we think about it. We tried to suck that tank in and get the fuel tank as small as possible because the engine looks bigger. It hangs out. When you're riding the bike, you see more of the heads, which, Milwaukee 8 has absolutely gorgeously sculpted heads. And so that's what we were trying to do. But we heard a lot of people say, hey, I want the range. I think they just like the fact that it kind of was the classic fuel tanks,
Yeah, I agree with you. I liked when that 3.5-gallon tank came out on the Breakout when it was introduced on the new Softail chassis in 2018. But you're right, I think more riders than not wanted that larger tank. And I think it doesn't take away from the bike at all having that larger 5-gallon on there. So I think it looks really nice.
It's funny, Breakout customers are so specific. That bike is really popular in Australia, in Germany, in Europe. To a lot of people, that is the quintessential Harley-Davidson. If you ask an American rider what the quintessential Harley-Davidson is, it might be a Street Glide or a Road Glide or a Heritage. But in Europe, it seems to be, things like Fat Boy and Breakout really are sort of like that silhouette they see in their minds when they close their eyes and think of Harley-Davidson. The feedback about not only the fuel tank, but even like it comes down to, because we do research, if we launch a model, we want to see how we did. So we talk to people who bought it about what they liked or don't like. The Breakout customer is very specific. It's that stance. It's the big front wheel. It's even the shape of the spokes and how many spokes. They like pretty dense spoke configuration. So it's just, it's really interesting as a designer. You don't want to put too many guardrails up on and too many have-to-haves with a design team, because you want to also explore things that are new and push and evolve the product, right? Evolve the motorcycles.
Yeah.
But it's good to know what really kind of like clicks the switches of the right customers for that particular motorcycle, because then we can lean into those things and make the bike really desirable for them.
Definitely. Let's talk about Fat Boy. When it was introduced on the 2018 Softail frame, that was a huge design and just style change for that bike. And I think in the right direction too. I think it was very striking. I think of all the bikes that were launched that year, that was the one that was like, wow, that's definitely different, but at the same time, it's still a Fat Boy. All the qualities of a Fat Boy were there still. Fat and taken to the next level in some cases, right? A bigger fat tire, rear tire.
Yeah. Fat Boy is about presence. It's about sustenance, and it's postmodern Harley-Davidson. That's what made the original Fat Boy stand out at the time, because it was so unique in the terms of its finishes and just how the solid wheels, the gray tank. When you paint a motorcycle like a flat gray like that, it just makes it look heavier and more substantial. And that was all intentional by those guys. And that bike just has this presence. When you walk in a room, you can kind of feel that bike if it's in there. But we really strive to make sure the rider triangle of Fat Boy is very unique as well. It's one of my favorite set of handlebars, to be honest, that we have. And we made sure that rider triangle is very similar to the 90. And so when you sit on a Fat Boy, and this goes for probably any motorcycle that we make, we're very conscientious about when we're designing it. What does it feel like when you're not just sitting on it, but grab the handlebars, put your feet up on the pegs. What do you feel like? Lowrider S and ST, you're kind of like, You know, you're in the wind like a little ball, like a speed ball, and you kind of feel you feel a certain way. Fat Boy is like you feel wide and present. The floorboards are wide, and the handlebars are wide, and the whole bike is wide. You know, we play with width on that motorcycle, and you just feel like you're just solid, like there's almost a magnet, you know, attracting you to the center of the earth when you're riding that thing. And Street Bob, you feel like you're on a chopper. You know, it's like narrow and you're kind of tight, and that's a cool feeling too for splitting lanes and stuff. So all these body positions affect your kind of like cognitive perception of yourself. And it sounds like craziness, but it's the stuff we talk about, you know, because we're talking about, you know, emotion, and we're talking about the way that we as humans, like, why are we attracted to these things? You can buy cheaper, faster, lighter motorcycles, but none of us want them. We want a Harley-Davidson, you know? So why is that? And then so we talk about this stuff. So Fat Boy has that presence about it. We poked some windows in the wheels a few years ago, which was just a nice little change. There's some folklore there about like crosswinds, and it's like
I asked you about that.
I mean, there's nothing really to that I know anyway. And we just did it because it looks beautiful, and it was a way to change up the wheel easily. But we did some really beautiful new two-tone trajectories too on Fat Boy this year. If you notice that little cutout of color on the front, it's a little polarizing, but we got some feedback from dealers like yourself that some of our two-tone layouts were getting a little bit commonplace and predictable. So this year we really tried to strive to do some really unique things with the two-tone breakups on Heritage and on Fat Boy.
Yeah, I noticed that. It's like a red and a black this year. I think we saw it today on the test ride.
And it's not a waterline, it's a set of scallops, which is difficult to do in the manufacturing plant. It took us a while to get that. And the reason why a lot of two-tone breakups on vehicles are very kind of parallel to the ground plane or earth is because it's just that it's easier for us to manufacture it that way. But to make a pinstripe do like a swoop, or you know, that is difficult to do and repeat it without flaws. So but we figured it out, and you know, we're always trying to push our technology and push the push the way we do things.
Yeah, well, the paint's always been one of the strengths of Harley-Davidson, and
absolutely
it shows. The paint on Harleys are awesome. I mean, especially when you compare them to the competition, it's night and day.
Yeah.
As you were describing the seating position of the Fat Boy, I just smiled because having just got off them, you know, we rode a couple hundred miles today or whatever. I was doing some filming that I'll show up on the screen here, and it doesn't matter who you put on the bike. They have that just wide, aggressive muscle stance with their arms out. You could put a 130-pound person, small person on there, and all of a sudden they're like the macho man, you know. So.
Oh, and we had such a wide variety of riders today. On the ride, we had some folks that were probably barely over 5 feet, right? And we're on that motorcycle, and they still look great on it, you know,
exactly,
right? And then someone like you look great too. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it does its job. And the Fat Boy is always gonna be one of those just iconic Harley-Davidsons in the lineup where you see it, that's a Harley. That 90% of people, even people don't ride, can probably say like that's the Fat Boy, because that's the one model that everybody knows about.
Right.
Fat Boy. So very cool. Okay, let's move on real quick to the classic bikes. So your Street Bob and your Heritage. This morning, and I've heard you say this before, you say that the style of the Heritage can really kind of be dated all the way back to the 1949 Hydroglide. Is that right? Yeah. And you're right. You know, having really looked at that era recently with the bike riders that came out this last year. That movie was great, by the way. And just
that's a great movie. Yeah.
Yeah. All those electric glides are. Hydroglides, excuse me. All those the Hydroglides that were in that movie. I think they had some duo glides in there as well.
Duo glides, yep.
Yeah.
Because the movie spanned, I think, at least 2 decades or a decade. So, yeah, there was the right. They did a really great job with. Just a little side note, but they did a great job with the motorcycles. I think the way that the brand was represented in that movie.
Agreed.
Yeah. So that team that worked on that, there was a good team that did that, and. We had a little oversight, but not much. They didn't need it. They knew what they were doing, and they nailed it. But yeah, so it is a great movie.
The bikes are perfect in that movie.
Yeah.
And last year we had the Hydroglide revival, right?
That's right.
The Icon.
And that was our little. We were trying to slip one in. You know that it's basically Tom Hardy's bike. I don't know if anyone even got that, but it's the same. You know, it's the same paint scheme. We got a chance to read that script before the movie came out, and we had a little. The film company worked with us, and we worked with them, and That was a really cool little thing to do, and I don't know if anyone picked up on that, but that's why we chose that paint scheme, because in my opinion he was one of the hero characters in the movie and in Danny Lyon's book. That's why we chose that particular motorcycle to pay homage to.
1956, right?
I think it's a 56 paint scheme. I do believe
Yeah,
that's
and that badge was
Very
cool bike, by the way. We have this classic looking bike that Harley-Davidson's been building the form factor or similar style for a very long time now.
Yeah.
My dad tells me in the 90s that the Heritage was like the bike. Like that was at least at our dealership, like the best selling bike. I think that tastes have changed a little bit. There's still plenty of people that love the Heritage and buy the Heritage, but that was like the Street Glide of the 90s or the Road Glide of the 90s. And just to see that one model last as long as it has is just very cool. And honestly, the evolution of that bike now, just the type of rider that it serves, a touring rider, you got a comfortable seat, comfortable suspension, the bags. It's kind of your touring cruiser, or one of the two, right?
That's right.
ST can be considered a touring cruiser as well, right?
Yeah, we call them, in my mind, they're sort of like, the Grand American touring bikes, like the Road Glide and Street Glide, are sort of our long-range choices. And I call the Lowrider ST and the Heritage sort of mid-range touring. But to be honest, you can do this. You can do long-range on those bikes too. So I mean, to your point, what's really interesting to me about Heritage is, especially after 2018, and now even more so with the engine upgrades that we've done and the rider assistant upgrades, that bike is so capable. In the twisties, like Angel's Crest on that thing when we launched it, like I had helped design that motorcycle, and I was still shocked about how well it went into the corners. And it just, if you kind of put some of those parts, the 16-inch wheels and the lace wheels, blah blah blah, it's not supposed to handle like that, but it's a testament to our engineering team, especially the folks that do handling, that motorcycle is so damn capable, so neutral, it's very forgiving. You can ride the snot out of it in a canyon, or you can cruise to Sturgis on it in a straight line. It does both things fantastic.
Yeah. That Softail chassis is an unbelievable platform. Unbelievable.
I know. And I almost got shot for it.
Why, because you got rid of the Dyna or what? Well, yeah, kudos to the engineers at the motor company. I tell people on the floor every day, like, I think that's probably Harley-Davidson's best chassis right now. Although it's not the one for me because I'm a touring guy, but for the class that it serves, I think it's the best. Anyways, I'd love to see long-term models in Harley-Davidson's lineup like the Heritage, so glad to see that still around.
And the other thing about it, to your point, is it's a customer favorite, right? There's a certain group of customers that's their Harley, and I'm always like, we keep an eye on sales figures, and I'm always like thinking about, relative to the rest of the lineup, which ones are the most popular choices, and Heritage remains to be one of the top three, I think in the top three Softail choices. Yeah, and it's a testament to just a great design that those guys did at that time, and we've slowly evolved it and made it better, and it still stands up today. Yeah.
Talk real quick about the finishes. I feel like this year, like in recent years, we've seen chrome and black as an option from the factory, but now it's kind of a mixture of both this year, right?
Yeah, we did a mix. It's so funny, and this is the way that we see it from the inside, so I don't, maybe you would be a great person to comment on how the dealers see it, but we do get feedback. When we did it, we went all black because people were saying that they were tired of the chrome. As soon as we did that, we heard, "Where's the chrome?" So it's like, it's tough to keep everybody happy. So then we had the two options for a while, and then we decided, why don't we just try to do a combo, and then folks can use the P&A catalog to either go full chrome or full black, whatever they want to do. And that's what we did this year, just to simplify things. Because the less complex we can make the portfolio, the easier it is on your dealers to order. You're more likely to see all the motorcycles that we have, versus if we have 1,000 different iterations, which I'm being facetious now, but if we have a ton of different iterations of the motorcycles, colors and finishes and paints, certain dealerships might not even ever see a certain color configuration. But now, by making all the choices a little bit smaller and the paint matrix a little bit smaller, if a customer sees something that might be something they wouldn't have seen at their dealership previously, now it's likely going to be there because everyone can kind of handle all the choices.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we'll cover Street Bob real quick, then we'll get into paint just real quickly.
Sure.
Street Bob.
Yeah.
It's a long-term model as well that I think has withstood the test of time. I don't think there's ever been a break in that model at all.
Right.
and I feel like it serves that bobber, the guy that wants a bobber bike.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you guys consider every year when you're designing it and looking for refreshes on that bike?
To us, street bob is sort of the minimalist choice, and I don't mean that in that by no means when I say minimalist is that something that's lesser. For a lot of folks, especially on a Harley-Davidson, minimal is better, and so the street bob really embodies beautiful big motor, 2 wheels, set of handlebars, and maybe a fuel tank. I mean, that's kind of like what you see, right? There's just not a whole lot to it. It's bobbed down, it's cut down to, it's our closest choice if you wanted sort of an out-of-the-box chopper from us. And it's the one bike that every time I ride one, and this trip is no exception, riding through these beautiful Texas hill country, it always reminds me of how good a motorcycle it is. I always seem to forget about it. I don't know why. I think there's just so many other bikes that we have that I spend time on. But the purity of that bike, and even on these twisty roads, I love that bike. And it's light, it's nimble, the power is direct. With the Mini Apes, you kind of have an attitude when you're riding it, and it's a cool little bike. And like in my mind, it's like one that I really want to personally own at some point too. Do a few things, custom touches to it, and but I love it. And it's again, we have the smaller 3.5 gallon tank that exposes the powertrain a little bit more. We put some black finishes, some wrinkle finishes on it, and has laced wheels again this year, and cast. So cast is standard and laced is an option. What else can you really say about it? It's just, it's just a pure, fantastic little Harley-Davidson with a bunch of cool character.
I know you love your vintage bikes. I'll put a link to the video that you did with. Is it Prism Supply?
Yeah, they came out. Yeah.
Came into your garage, and so you showed off some of your vintage bikes there.
It was awesome.
How much of your vintage past experience helps you with design on these modern bikes? Because I feel like that is something in knowledge and experience that is invaluable in the Harley-Davidson world, because we rely on the design of these Harleys, and so to have someone that's so involved in that culture, helping with the design of these bikes, the guy that is instrumental as you, how has that helped you out in your...
Well, personally, it's helped me out a lot. I mean, there's a lot of nuances in the brand, especially with the product over the years, and even thinking about the 25 Softail lineup, we really have kind of like a bike from each era, right? The Heritage is from the 50s. I would argue that Street Bob is a bit 60s, and that 90s is represented by certainly Fat Boy and Breakout, and then you have ST and S that are certainly, you could say that they're this generation, but there's a lot of FXR and FXRT in that.
Totally.
So that, that's what's really cool about this lineup is we're kind of taking the best of each of those generations and making a motorcycle that represents what those generations love so much about our products.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, neither did I until you just asked me that question. But yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that. I've never thought about that. Yeah, I like that.
So just having a basic knowledge, and by no means do I know everything. I mean, there are people that are watching this know a hell of a lot more than I do about it, but it does help for sure. We can play on little things. If you notice the hand grips on the Softails, it's the waffle grip. I wanted a waffle grip. That started with Nightster and Pan America and Sportster S. I wanted a little nod to the Hydroglide era on all those new bikes, just to kind of tie the generations together. So that's like a little Easter egg that I put in there. I do that all the time with my team. I think that shit's really important because it connects the current product to the past product, and that's what everyone loves about Harley-Davidson is, even though that we're kind of pushing things into the future, there's always this connection and red thread that goes right back to 1903. And I really hope that never changes. Whoever takes my place, I hope they know more about the vintage bikes than I do, so that they can continue to do that and make those bikes relevant to all of us. And how could you be in this role and not understand that? Like, to me, it's like it's table stakes. And so, I'm always, every time I go to the museum, or every time I go to a swap meet, or if I talk to somebody who's very knowledgeable, or someone even who's just getting into it, maybe discovered something about the brand that I didn't know. It's so much has happened with this brand. There's always something to learn, and then turn around, and if I can create a motorcycle or a part of a motorcycle that speaks to that, someone out there is going to be walking through a dealership, or will be at Daytona or Sturgis or Born Free, and see a detail on a bike and go, oh my God, that's the panhead grip, and that's the fun, that's what I love to do, it's cool. Yeah, well, it's a real honor to have this job and to work with this team. Everybody at Harley-Davidson, to be honest. I mean, it's awesome.
People notice that stuff too.
I hope so.
People do.
Because sometimes I get asked, like, why are you doing that?
Yeah. Well, I think when someone owns it and loves it and really starts to look at the history or go to the museum and then they notice things at the museum, it's like, wait a second, I saw that on my bike. That's cool that you take that into thought when you're designing. That's cool.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Let's talk real quick about the custom paint this year, because there's like a special badge for it and everything, right?
Yeah, so factory custom paint options or custom paint options. Yeah, there's a bunch of flames and there's a bunch of really cool colors with flops.
Well, there's Midnight Firestorm.
Right.
And then there's Whiskey Firestorm.
There's Mystic Shift, right?
Mystic Shift, yeah. Yeah, so let's talk real quick about the models that you put some of these on. So you had the Midnight Firestorm on a Lowrider ST, which I thought was very appropriate.
Yeah.
Again, one more, I think, nod to the FXRT Sport Glide. And then you got it on the breakout as well, which is very appropriate for like a chopper-esque bike.
Yep.
And then the Mystic Shift. Well, tell me about that color, because that's one of those ones that you kind of, depending on the angle and the light, it's a little bit different color.
So we call those they're paints with action, or they're dynamic, or they're flop. Right. Our customers love these, and they work so good on Harley-Davidsons because Harley-Davidsons have a lot of, especially the fuel tanks. You know, it's a round compound shape, so it reflects both the sky tone and it reflects the ground tone. So if you have a paint that is dynamic like that and has that flop, it'll pick up both of those tones, but it also picks it up through the color of the paint. So in some light, it looks like a different color, right? So they shift. That's why it's named Mystic Shift.
Yeah.
They're difficult to engineer. We work with our supplier on that to make sure that they flop, because sometimes it'll flop in one direction, a very pleasing, beautiful color, but it might flop the opposite direction in something that's not very appealing. So they'll tweak it, and it's all about the mica, and like there's all kinds of technology inside paint that I'm not going to pretend to understand, but I know when the right colors are there, and I can say that's it. But and so they do a great job of bringing that together. And then we made badges that matched all three of those. So the badges are color keyed to the tank badges are color keyed to the different paint options as well. And there's new badging on pretty much everything as well. Another note for Lowrider S and ST fans is we shifted this year from bronze to red. So red is the new accent color for the S and ST models. The bronze, the gold tone that we had for so long, since 16 and a half, that is gone this year, and we go to red. And that translates all the way through the racing bikes as well. Just mix it up a little bit.
I think that was a good move.
Yeah. So we're just, and we'll probably play with that over the years, but it's just a way to keep things fresh. And
the bronze is very cool though. But yeah, we've run it for a while, right? You guys have run it for a while, and I think it's a nice change, especially with the introduction of the chrome, because the chrome bike has different wheels. So
the chrome, yeah, it's kind of its own thing internally, and the chrome bike also has the classic wing logo, right?
Yeah, I think you said that it was a logo off of the Tour Glide, right? You saw it originally on the Tour Glide in 1980.
Yep. And we tweaked it a little bit with the kind of the type and stuff, and took some of the elements out of it. Because those were cool logos actually back then. The Tour Glide logo was cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, new hand controls as well.
Yeah.
We stuck to metal because we know people love our metal hand controls, 100%. But we had to change the switches a little bit to just to package some of the new electronics.
Well, Brad, appreciate your time. You're probably tired. You probably want to go to bed. It's been a long day. So.
Well, we got a ride in the morning. We
That's
have another couple 100 miles tomorrow, so
that's true.
Can't wait.
Yeah, we gotta get our beauty sleep, right? Right. But yeah, I appreciate you sitting down with me. I had a lot of really positive feedback when you sat down. You're on my podcast back in 2022, awesome. So I got a lot of.
That was fun.
It was fun. It was cool. I'm gonna link a video in the top right-hand corner here for you guys. If you want to see my first podcast I did with Brad, he talks a little bit more about his career and his background and things like that. Very interesting watch. So check that out. But thanks again, Brad, and for having me out here to ride these new Softail cruisers. And yeah, I look forward to what you guys come out with in the future.
Thanks, Matt.
Appreciate it, Brad.
Thanks, everybody.